The doorkeepers announced him to the Lord and then escorted him inside. That person bowed down to Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and with joined palms, he described to the Lord how a number of kings were suffering because Jarasandha had imprisoned them. 20,000 kings who had refused to submit absolutely to Jarasandha during his world conquest had been forcibly imprisoned by him in the fortress named Giri Vraja. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments, how did Jarasandha imprison the kings? This verse answers, they did not accept subservience to him, sannatim, by paying taxes, etc. Therefore he imprisoned them in Giridhwaja fort. How many? 20,000 were imprisoned. It is learned from Mahabharata and other sources that he had the desire to perform a sacrifice to Mahabhairava by offering the lives of 100,000 kings. So then this was, at the beginning. He had 20,000, so another 80,000 to go. Yeah. So I think Prabhupada mentions earlier that is that there isn't actually anything as human sacrifices. Just that they do it because because this attachment to ignorance and their fruit of mood, so they always think something extreme will give better results. Does that make sense? If a horse is good, then a person must be better. Right? Yes.
So in Manu, it doesn't mention human sacrifice.
No, it's not. There's no such thing. It's just that, Prabhupada says these dacoits and demons, they do these things, but it's not actually the thing. It's just, it's just like, let's say, I want to prove my point. I give the most extreme example possible. And I couldn't give a second because, from that I'd have to come back to a little bit more normal, right? So in the same way as when they perform their religious principles, since they're so attached to their material results, they think the more extreme it is, the better it is. And because it's for their purpose, then they don't see any problem in this. So, yeah. Yes.
If these 20,000 kings have not paid their taxes,
they refused to submit to him because they didn't feel he was a proper ruler or something. So they didn't feel they should pay taxes. So he went out and conquered. So he wasn't originally over them. He had his kingdom, they had theirs. Then he came and took over. Right? And they didn't feel that they needed him to be doing that. Does that make sense? So that's why you see in the Rajasuya, the horse goes around and they go to each kingdom. And then either the king comes out and pays tribute or they fight. Does that make sense? So there's always this aspect of that they could see the benefit and therefore want to be working under that king. But in this case, it appears he just went and conquered them and then they weren't willing to pay taxes. So he just imprisoned them.
He did not have any other choice.
No, it appears they wouldn't have another choice because we didn't hear of him doing Rajasuya or anything like that. Because when a Rajasuya is done, other people can't do it for, I'm not sure what it is, but there's either a time frame or generation or within the family or something. That's why Yudhishthira Maharaj had done Rajasuya. Then Duryodhana, of course, wants to do better or match or something, but he can't do. So the only other one available that he could do is, I think, the Vaishnava or something, Yagya. He can't do the Rajasuya. So there's certain ones like that I know of. It's within that generation or within that time, so no one else could do. Otherwise, it's going to conflict, because otherwise, you've done all that. That should last your lifetime. Otherwise, then if everybody else can get in on it, what's the point? Yeah.
Was the earth the same size when Krishna was here as it is now?
Yeah, it's always the same.
20,000 kings sounds like a lot of kings.
Yeah. But I mean, how many people are at a rave?
How many people are what?
At a rave. I'm saying you have these things, they just pack in. You have, some of these sports stadiums, they hold 100,000 people, or I've heard of one that's 250,000, probably in China, like that. So Yeah, 50, that means it's not like we have to remember that this being a prison, this is probably not like an Amsterdam prison, where everyone has their own apartment and all arrangements and everything like
I
that.
was thinking more in terms of just 20,000 kings ruling and their kingdoms. That seems like a lot of
Kings. Yeah, well, he wants to take over the world, so they can be all over the place. It's not. Plus, it means whether they're specifically kings, meaning that they're the ruling kings, or they're Kshatriyas in that royal line. You know, it's just like you take Duryodhana and his 100 brothers. So only he's the king, and then the other 99 go along with the package. So it could be, it's not specific here, but the point is it's yeah.
Even in India, it has been observed that for some of the rituals, they perform animal sacrifice like a chicken or a goat or something like
A
that.
chicken or a goat.
Yeah,
They
so-
perform a sacrifice of
They
a
perform
chicken or a goat.
Demigod for a demigoddess, that is what they do that.
But seeing that Manu says chickens aren't offerable in sacrifice, how are they doing a chicken sacrifice? See, now if they're in the Caribbean, I understand. But if they're over this side, then not so much. Right? You understand? So chickens, that's more voodoo, hoodoo, that kind of jazz. You get out your sticks and do all the things and chant your mantras, and that's what it's for. Like this means here these sacrifices, then it's going to be a horse and that kind of thing.
So actually what they do then, that is simply sentimental.
It's just they make it up. They just make it up. So it's just you put into it whatever you do.
But Maharaj, many times they believe that if a particular sacrifice is not being done once in a year, then it affects the entire village or the entire city, wherever they are staying. And it does affect, till now it has been observed that this is what is happening.
It does affect means that they have a rule, then they have to do it, but it's not that they're not going to get a reaction for that. See, why do they need to have that chicken sacrifice? Right? Because if they don't have that chicken sacrifice, all the previous generation of people who did the chicken sacrifice, who are now chickens that need to be sacrificed, won't be sacrificed. So therefore, you have to carry on the tradition. Someone's got to sacrifice them. Otherwise, they have to take birth over in Thailand or something, like that.
No sacrifice there.
Yeah, no, just end up in an orange sauce or something. So it's not going to work. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yes.
Maharaj,
Yes.
not this particular goat sacrificing thing, but a thing like this which goes directly against Srila Prabhupada's instructions of no meat eating, etc. If
Jarasandha is really worried about that.
no,
Oh, I can't do this, Srila Prabhupada. It's like, yeah, if he would, that's fabulous. But unfortunately, that's probably not the way he's thinking.
so there is this type of things like this particular thing. If the outside Hindu, the karmis are doing this, then should we go and tell them about bhakti, or should we at least they're doing some dharma?
No, the point is if you have an opportunity to preach and all that, and they're inspired, then that's what you do. I remember I mentioned before that some Calcutta gentlemen, aristocratic gentlemen, I think, I'm not sure if someone visited them at their office or they actually visited the temple. And their point was we all want to become members. And they ask, why? What's your inspiration? He says, because this one guy that we know, he's so rough and low class and, just like that. He became a devotee, a member of your society, and now he's one of the nicest, most gentle persons we know. And so that means this society is powerful. We want to be a member. Like that. So if you have the opportunity, of course you preach them, they change. Because, talking about chickens, I think he mentioned that he would not eat one leg less than a whole chicken every day. That's at one sitting, like that. So, talking about chickens. So. I'm just saying it's to a devotee. Like that. And so then when he met the devotees and he took up the process, then really he was one of the, if I think of devotees who are humble and always very nice and gentle and cultured, not necessarily you can say sophisticated, refined, I mean cultured in the way of just the mood and the humility and the service attitude. I can't think of somebody having that mood more than him.
And those guys, did they become better?
That I don't know, but it's just that the life member Walla was telling me about it, So that's the whole point, is that if you can preach, then that's going to be somebody's benefit, because they step out of this cycle. Otherwise, they have to stay in the cycle. And that's just the way it goes. That's why in a certain area it always goes on. And it happens somewhere else. It's not that it's not going to happen. It's just maybe they don't do, someone else does. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Well, same answer for somebody who is worshipping Ganpati in that Ganpati group, or something doing the extreme.
No, but the point is taking up devotional service is beneficial to everyone. Now, if somebody is accepting some religious principles, then they can relate to that concept and now take up a higher one. Though some being attached to it, that materialism that's there, then they wouldn't be interested in devotional religion. They'd only be interested in religion that's applied for fruitive work. So you just have to see. You just have to see what kind of piety is there. Like that. But preaching is always the your best solution. You don't avoid because otherwise then who would you preach to? Right? If you're not preaching to the Hindus because they follow things that aren't actually proper, how would you preach to those who are not Hindus who really don't follow? Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur points out that the next 6 verses explain the king's request to the Lord. The king said, as related through their messenger, O Krishna, O immeasurable soul, destroyer of fear for those surrendered to you. Despite our separatist attitude, we have come to you for shelter out of fear of material existence. Right? So this principle of separatist attitude, then Kapila Muni describes this in the 3rd canto, that a separatist is someone who, in this case, someone who's a devotee, but their interest in devotional service is separate than what Krishna will get. Right? So it's not that they're doing their duties just because they should be done in the mode of goodness, but they're doing them worshiping the deity for some fruit of benefit, or they're very proud of their material position, and therefore that's their specific drive, and they think that this is okay. Yes.
Don't call them Sakam bhaktis?
They're all Sakam, but this is specific. It's not that they want to do everything connected to Krishna, but they don't necessarily know how to, or they don't have that conviction and all that. But here it's that people who have conviction to do these things because of the material benefit they'll have, but at the same time they have that devotional. So then he mentions that the pride one, then that's devotional service in the mode of ignorance. But it's that they're proud of their position and a separatist. Mode of passion means then they want the benefit, material benefit from all their devotional work, and they're a separatist. Mode of goodness means they're not a separatist, but they're performing their duties because they should be done, so they have that aspect. But they don't also want any trouble or anything like that. So there's that element of goodness that they don't want material difficulties. Then pure goodness is you're doing it because it pleases Krishna. Does that make sense? So that's the sarva dharmam parityaja. So before that, you're using the process of karma yoga and jnana yoga. The point is that when they're separatists, then the misra aspect is actually the prominent. Does that make sense? Yes.
Was Kapila explain that like you were according to nodes?
Yes. You can look in the third canto. It's devotional service according to the modes of nature. Okay. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments. First, they surrender by uttering twice Krishna out of respect. We saw this also one time before. They said Krishna twice. They can talk basically almost as fast as if you were speaking in Spanish, right? I think Spanish is the perfect language for being angry. You know, you can say so many things so fast and get in all these sharp, you know, and loud, yeah. But Bengali does pretty good.
So now this separatist attitude is what is the main obstacle to pure devotional service?
Means is material attachment is the obstacle. So it's just that when one's a separatist, it's a bit more extreme. So it's not that one doesn't it's not that anybody with attachment's a separatist. It's that the aspect of the separatist means that they're doing the service for the material benefit. They're doing it for the prestige they'll get. They're doing it for the benefits that they'll get. Does that make sense? You know, so someone, you know, says, you know, I've been doing Sankirtan for the last 30 years, you know, what do I have to show for it? That's devotional service in the mode of passion. So it's not pure it's not pure devotional service. But they want to be respected as if they're on that platform and get all the material benefit. So it's not in a pure state. You know what I'm saying? So there's a mix of passion and ignorance there. And that aspect of the separatist. And so then it's difficult for them to continue. Does that make sense? Though ultimately the goal is to please Krishna. So they're not exactly in the same position as Bhakti Mr. Karma, who don't believe in the eternal form of the Lord. Right? Or even if they do, it's of no consequence to them. So devotees, what we're meaning here, devotees, they ultimately, their ultimate goal is to please Krishna. But in the meantime, the focus on the material benefits and prestige and all that are a bit too strong for it to be very progressive. So for them, then this attitude will be a big obstacle. Now for someone who is interested in pure devotion but not necessarily able to function in that way, then it's just as the attachment is there, it'll be slow. But as they continue in the process with the desire to please Krishna, the heart becoming purified, the process will speed up. But for the others, they can be doing for a long time, but because they want the material benefit, they're not really removing the anarthas. So it'll take a while. Yes.
We say that the attitude is actually a mental state. It's more of what the mind drives you. So when we perform devotional service, we learn how to control the mind. Despite whatever wants or says, you perform whatever you're supposed to perform.
Yes.
Would that be also separatist?
No, that's the mode of goodness. You're doing it because that's what you're supposed to do. You may not have that, it may not be spontaneous, it may not, but that's just there. Or it can be spontaneous, you like doing that because you like performing the rules and regulations, you like doing them proper, you like piety.
But in some areas, you're more touched. In some areas,
That's
less.
there, but because that's why these three modes there within the material. So pure devotional service is Shuddha Sattva. So it's pure goodness. So that's the standard. But the idea is that we try to situate ourselves in goodness and from there try to get to pure goodness. Because all you're doing is changing the mood. While in the passion and ignorance, there may have to be a change in what you're doing and how you identify and all these different things. Okay.
So the separatist attitude is the same as Bhaktividya Purna mentions Puja Labha Pratishta.
Of?
Puja Labha Pratishta.
Pujlabha Pratishta. That's, Puja Labha and Pratishta, these things is that everybody's inclined towards these because they're in the material world. The separatist means he thinks that this is the way it should be. Not so much that he's worshiping the deity because the benefit he'll get from the deity. So that's motive passion. And the separatist means he has an idea of getting that benefit that's not necessarily for using in Krishna's service. Now, you want a benefit, but you want to use it for Krishna, then that's not a separatist. Does that make sense? Catch what the word separatist means. It means separate from the Lord, right? If we say that there's some separatists, it means they want to break off from the authority. So it's not about material desire, it's about breaking off from the authority. You understand?
Yes, ma'am.
But because it's a material thing, they'll have the other material aspects also, like everybody else. But the point is they're not trying to do things necessarily to please Krishna, but more themselves. Though you may find ultimately that's what is there, but when this is prominent, you generally avoid them. Especially it mentions that those in the mode of ignorance, you can just totally avoid them, like that. I mean, you'll behave properly if you meet them or have to interact or do service, but you would not choose them as association at all. And it's not you can say, oh no, we have to be broad. No, that's just sentiment. You just don't have to associate. So that's different from just the neophyte who's attached, who tends to be inclined towards materialism. We have to get there's a material attachment, and then there is the separatist mood from the Lord. The two things. They may go parallel together, but the point is someone can have the attachment without the separatist. The separatist will always have the attachment. Is that okay?
According to this, is it like this separatist method on the side of rasa, not tattva? Because of the attachment or the taste he's getting.
Yeah, but it's material rasa.
Yes.
Yeah, means that basically it'll be more towards partiva rasa. There might be some swargiya rasa if there's passion, because they're willing to follow the process, but it's not so much about the relationship. You see swargiya more in goodness. So that's the thing, passion's in between the two. Does that make sense? Yes.
Can we take as an example Christianity and then Protestants being separatists from, within Christianity?
But there it's not so much separate from the Lord, it's maybe separate from what everybody else is doing.
Church.
Yeah. So that would be more of a political. This is that they have an idea to benefit themselves separate from the Lord getting the benefit. See, karma yoga means you're getting benefit, the Lord's getting benefit. But separatist means you're getting benefit by the Lord providing it. So it's not about his. So you're only approaching and dealing on the secondary platform as much as you can make it work. Did you find them? You found it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So is it like what we're saying, or we're totally off the mark here?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it's something that generally you never hear anybody discuss. The devotional service in the three modes. Like that.
Want me to read what it says?
Okay, why not?
Devotional service executed by a person who is envious, proud, violent, and angry, and who is a separatist, is considered to be in the mode of darkness.
Mode of?
Darkness.
Darkness. And then the purport?
Okay. It has already been stated in Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st canto, 2nd chapter, that the highest, most glorious religion is the attainment of causeless, unmotivated devotional service. In pure devotional service, the only motive should be to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is not actually a motive. That is a pure condition of the living entity. In the conditioned stage, when one engages in devotional service, he should follow the instruction of the bona fide spiritual master in full surrender. The spiritual master is the manifested representative of the Supreme Lord because he receives and presents the instructions of the Lord as they are by disciplic succession. It is described in Bhagavad Gita that the teachings therein should be received by disciplic succession Otherwise there is adulteration. To act under the direction of a bona fide spiritual master with a motive to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead is pure devotional service. But if one has a motive for personal sense gratification, his devotional service is manifested differently. Such a man may be violent, proud, envious, and angry, and his interests are separate from yours.
Yes?
So, but are there symptoms of this, like, or is it?
You just said.
Yeah, but it could be consciousness, but it is external symptoms also showing.
Yeah, it means that anger and pride and all these things. Huh? Violent. But it doesn't mean that they walk around with an axe handle or something and hitting people. It just means that, just how they deal and how they, their sense of need for justice, all these different things like that. But the point is they're proud of their position. So whenever all these years I've been talking about, someone comes in, I'm a doctor, and he's not a doctor, I'm actually a better devotee than him, I'm quoting from this. That's why they're professionals, they're paka and this and that, but because of the mode of ignorance, then you're not actually supposed to spend much time with them.
So it's not necessarily somebody who's generally in the mode of ignorance, like some grubby person, like angry
No, it's
person.
devotional service in the mode of ignorance because it's not connected to the Lord.
Yeah, but they themselves could be like a paka, nice person.
Yes, because you have to take all these things are based on the consciousness in that. It's not about the external.
That's why I'm asking the question in the first place, about the external symptoms.
But the external are these
Yeah.
subtle things like that.
Yeah, but not generally about the person's nature, but maybe just their devotional service.
Yes, when we say it's about the devotional service, take it that it's about the devotional service. Does that make sense? In other words, if we're trying to get a specific answer, then ask that specific answer. Don't ask something kind of close to it and then keep pushing the point because we didn't specifically answer what you asked. So you want to know is, okay, I have an idea that a guy in the mode of ignorance, is funky and dirty and smelly and all that kind of stuff. And so does that mean the devotee in the mode of ignorance then looks like that? He's like that. And then we'd say, no, it's about the consciousness. It's about that he's proud of his position. So he could be like that, or he could be very sophisticated. But the point is it's the consciousness that's the thing, because it's a weakness in the devotion. Therefore, the devotion is being performed in the mode of ignorance. Mode of ignorance doesn't have to be gross. That people don't know. Mayaya pratyajnana, they're in ignorance. Like that. So that's the whole thing. So when we deal on these things, especially when we're trying to cut across from the principal point that I'm making into the secondary, and we want a very specific secondary answer, you have to ask that very specific question, because I will always give you an answer that tries to show the primary aspect and that you can work it out. Because the exact example that you have in your head of a guy you saw on the street up in Cairns, I don't know. And so therefore you're pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, and I could go on saying that for about an hour. It's not an intellectual discussion. And I would really appreciate it that being on the 10th canto, trying to discuss the Lord's pastimes, that we will discuss what's spiritual and primary rather than what's secondary and what's political. We have to make that distinction. Otherwise, I answered your question at least 5 times. Literally. You said, is it this? I said, no. Is it that? No. I says, no. What are the symptoms? I said those symptoms right there. It didn't say dirty, smelly, and funky. He may be, but it's not that. Because you can have this guy, he's a really nice guy. He's a homeless guy, he's a nice guy. So that's so don't take that as the externals as the whole thing. We have to take the primary. Otherwise it's very, very frustrating, sad to say. We're trying to discuss the Lord's pastimes, the 10th canto, and all we do is deal with political issues that actually are for, Bhagavad Gita. Because there, that's what Krishna's coming in cold. We don't know. We have these things. We're dealing with them. And then it goes through and shows. At least it should be finished by 6th canto. Then the whole thing is about pure devotion. That rectifies everything. It's the pure devotion. Lack of pure devotion will create all these problems. But when we have to come from the lower level and do everything from there, it makes it very, very slow and very, very painful, actually. So we have to learn is that you're given the things, you just apply. Does it apply to what you're talking about? And if it doesn't, why not? Because you haven't said that. It's only on the 5th time, then you said. So if the guy is dirty and all these kinds of things, what we would consider the strongest example of someone in the mode of ignorance, that even his lifestyle, his dirtiness and everything else is there, is that what we mean? But it was a discussion of consciousness. So I don't know that that's what you mean. So only when you ask it on the 5th time, then we explained it, then you go, oh, now I understand. So you have to be very, very careful to not keep pushing a point that you have an idea of that no one else in the room understands what is the samskar that you're working with. Does that make sense? Because mode of ignorance is a level of consciousness. Now, it's not that it doesn't manifest as all these other things. But you can have, let's say, like a smarta who follows all the rules, but he's proud that he's a smarta, like Gopal Chapala. Totally in the mode of ignorance, even though he's a Paka Brahmin, does all the things like that, follows all the rules, knows philosophy, knows logic, can speak in Sanskrit, the whole thing. But he's in ignorance because his consciousness is there, what he wants to gain from his Brahminical position. Right? So that's why then in the Gita, in those last part of the Gita, it explains all these different positions and activities and thought and everything from the 3 modes. Because it's a matter of, it's not just there's one thing, the guy's in it, so everything's there. It can have a mix because no mode is pure. So mode of ignorance, but there may be some other aspect. It's like the pig farmer next door, but he's a really pleasant guy. And maybe even likes to help out, likes the kids, so when they get into, they come over and make trouble, he just laughs about it. Of course he brings out a shotgun and they run off, but he'll laugh, like that. So there is an aspect that he's a nice guy, but at the same time there are animals that are nice. Certain animals, they're really pleasant and nice, and other ones are not very nice. So the whole point is you have to be able to take it and apply it into the area and not keep taking and pushing a particular point without explaining exactly what it is you're looking for. Because otherwise, I don't know the extent of the samskar. Does that make sense? So what exactly is in your mind, the impression, and what you're trying to apply it to, then you have to say that if you want a specific answer in that area. Otherwise, you take the generic one and then you apply it and it works. And if in trying to apply it, it doesn't, then re-ask the question based on that. But because the answer wasn't about the specific samskar, don't keep saying, no, it's not that, no, not that, no, not that. Because you haven't said, because we have to understand, being a discussion intellectual platform, it's supposed to lack these certain social elements of trying to make the other person figure out what's going on, like that. That's in personal relations that you do. But in this environment, it's not actually meant for that. So you have to be more specific. Or accept the more generic and apply it. And only when you run into a problem, then you say, what is the problem in applying it? Like that. But otherwise, if you just stick to those points, then it's a very specific samskar. And so what we're talking here, I'm working on the principle of people who are intelligent, sophisticated, think that they're quite, the Naradamas. They think they're very sophisticated and all that. They wear their suits, they got their Italian shoes, they fly around business or first class, they stay in big hotels, like that, but they're hired by some corporation. They go around, make deals, make all these things and that, but they're Shudras and they just are in the mode of ignorance. Or they're business people who also do like this. So they consider themselves very sophisticated because he has a suit, he has this, he stays in these places, he's better than everybody else. So that's the kind of mode of ignorance that is being alluded to here, because that you can identify within the society of devotees, because devotees aren't funky, smelly, dirty. So therefore, then it wouldn't apply. We're applying it to those who are thinking themselves special. So we're targeting the false ego aspect of it, not the dirtiness aspect of ignorance. So that's what's being related here. And because of that, then they can be self-centered, they can be violent. In other words, if it comes to some push, comes to shove and something, they can be very cutthroat in getting something done. And like that. So these are the symptoms of it. That's what we're looking at. Does that make some sense? So like that, that's how we're supposed to look at the questions and ask. Otherwise, then these different questions just feed off each other and we never deal with the primary. And it always goes off into the secondary, because unless the secondary is answered, it doesn't have a connection to the primary. No, we're supposed to take the primary and then from there see how to put it into the secondary. Like that. That's the approach here. It means up to 6th canto, we were doing it the other way. Like that. So, we'd spend sometimes 2 weeks on, one topic. Like that, because it just kept going through these aspects. But now as we come into this, we're trying to show what's pure devotional service and what's not. And so that aspect in consciousness and the fine points there, that's the points that we're trying to get down. Does that make sense? So if you can take it to a particular point and you can't get it past that and you have some other areas you can't, then explain those, in a very, direct way. Does that make sense? And then you'll get the answer you're looking for. Otherwise, then it takes too long. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? So it's something that, it's just, either be more direct or connect the dots. Or connect the dots, and when they don't connect, then be more something like that. But these are ways that it works. Otherwise, if it's always just working off certain semantics of the words, we have to understand ignorance is a very broad thing. The whole material world is in ignorance. That means even Brahma and the great sages are in ignorance because they're ignorant of their relationship with the Lord. So that's the main ignorance that we're talking about there. So everyone's in ignorance. Then within that overall ignorance, then we have goodness, passion, and ignorance. Mm-hmm. Right? So that's what we're trying to catch here. Is that okay? That makes sense. Yeah.
Like how you give a nice example, Gopal Champal doing all the Vedic things, Brahmanical things, but in complete ignorance. So Prabhupada in a morning walk conversation was asked this question that Prabhupada, it is said that happiness means mode of goodness, right? He said, yes, but if he thinks that he's happy, then he's not in the mode of goodness, he's in the mode of ignorance. Like that.
He thinks he's happy, yes, because he actually can't be happy.
Yeah. So mode of goodness means to understand that I'm not happy. I cannot be happy in this world.
Yeah, because what he called, Prabhupada says that the fools or the Paramahamsas, they're the only ones that are happy in this world. So if he thinks he's happy, then it comes on that. So these are the leftovers. So we're talking in the realm of ignorance, and then dividing that up into goodness, passion, and ignorance. So that's why we have to be very careful of the extreme examples, because everything's ignorance here. Does that make sense? Not that we can't deal with the extreme, but the point is that we're trying to catch the this point is that they're surrendering to Krishna, and they're acknowledging that up to this point they were functioning, they're devotees, but they weren't functioning really and seriously in devotional service. They were much more inclined towards the benefits they were getting from their material activities, performing their duties as kings. And so in this way they were acting as separatists. So they would identify more as kings than, like Yudhishthira Maharaj. You never see him really identifying as a king. He's a devotee. He's doing his kingly duties, but he doesn't identify as a king. You'll see the other Pandavas refer to him as the king, or Krishna as the king. So they're the ones that refer to him in that way. Even Duryodhana. Does that make sense? So that's the point, is where the emphasis is. So the emphasis is off, but now they've surrendered, and one of the symbols, they say, oh Krishna, Krishna, twice they're saying, rather than saying it once and, this is what we want, and continuing with that mode of passion. They've now come to the point of understanding that surrendering to the Lord in devotion is actually what should be done, rather than just surrendering how much it takes to get their work done. Does that make sense? So this is the fine point we're trying to make, because it has to be applied into our life. And so we have to be able to understand, am I doing this for Krishna? Am I doing this for myself? Is it mixed? Is it, how is working? Like that. That's what we're trying to get, is in my life, how do I apply this? Because if you can figure it out in your life, that's how you can preach and give it to others. Because the preaching's not a matter of particular knowledge and let's say, logical skills, or some lines to say back or anything like that. It's a matter of what you realize. That's what you can explain very nicely, because then you can see where it goes, how to go with it. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Can we say that actually up until devotees come to the level of Madhyama, there is some separatistic mentality? But
There can be, but it's just a matter of whether it's prominent enough to really slow you down, or it's just there, but because of the neophyte nature. And so if we're having good association, we're practicing, nicely like that with that conviction, then it'll move forward very quickly. But if we're very comfortable, that's why we always refer to this idea is that, we're Westerners, we can't do these things. That I'm referring to that not from a political point of view. We're referring to it that if you identify that you're a Westerner, instead of identifying that I'm sole servant of Krishna, it's going to have a problem. Now, what facility you use, what you're comfortable in, the Prabhupada says you should be comfortable. So that means what position you can take. But we have to understand is that devotional service is Krishna's taste, not ours. Right? We've been here for unlimited lifetimes with no taste. So we can't claim that, it's our taste in devotion. No. Like that. When you get to the purified stage, then you can say we have a taste in devotional service. So, therefore, since we don't have a taste, what taste is given to us? What Krishna likes, what the acharyas use. That's what's given. So we may start off with, coming from the background that I'm from and my particular conditioning, I'm comfortable in this kind of environment. Like that, with this kind of, living arrangements, this kind of scheduling, this kind of dress, food, recreation, all these things. But I have to understand, since it's about devotion and about Krishna, ultimately it has to adjust to the secondary form, looks more like what Krishna likes. Rather than, I'll keep it this way because it's just about the bhakti in the heart, and I'll change that. But how can you change that if you're still identifying and doing things just for yourself? So here, that's a separatist attitude. But because I would consider this point of devotional service in the mode of ignorance and passion and that separate attitude as a very, very strong point, I generally try to avoid applying it to devotees' positions. But being brought up, when we take that as a very strong position, that's exactly what it is. We're Westerners, we're superior, our culture's superior, we're more sophisticated than this Indian culture. Right? And so all these things, we have a much better, analytical system in the modern academics, our political forum, see how broad-minded we are and how liberal we are, and the Vedic is not. And our academic position is better, see the Indians, how poor they are. What they don't know is that the guy that they're working for is Indian. It's just like Indians go to America. Do they get good visas if they work in technology and stuff like that? Fabulous visas, 10-year visas. They can say they get the green cards, they can get the whole thing. Westerners come to India, do they get good visas? No. Never. So are they adding anything to the Indian environment? No, they got a million guys that can do all that stuff. What do they need Westerners for? So actually it's because, they're better at it. You know what I'm saying? So this whole thing is that we're more sophisticated. This is mode of ignorance. This is attachment. This is pride. Therefore, that's why it's detrimental devotional service. We just tend to avoid trying to bring this point out. We allude to it, and the people take it nice, but if they need to be hit over the head with one of those big wooden mallets that they use in the circus, like that, then we'll do it. That's not the problem, we're trying to be more cultured, right? Is that so? That's the whole thing, is that these kings have seen, they've seen the light, right? So they're trying to come across from the darkness to the light and understand and surrender to Krishna. So it's not just that they're doing this just to get out of prison, but it's actually they've realized they need to surrender to Krishna. That's why the 2 Krishnas. Otherwise, they'd only say one. Right? Unless they were trying to butter them up, then, like that. There's a business deal on hand. Okay, then you say, we'll say it 3 times, if it'll get better, So it's like, what was it, that guy, he went to some business guy, small business guy, and like that. And someone, he was really gross materialist. And then somebody came, I think maybe a devotee or something, had come and asked him directions, and he had actually given correct directions, right? Also a strange thing, but he had given very nonchalantly. He didn't like nicely point it out or walk him there, do things. He just kind of with his finger just pointed. He didn't want to get too involved. And so then later, when he went to hell, then he found that his whole body's in hell, but his finger, is in a nice place. It's good. It's not suffering. So he asked, why is this? And he says, because, all of your sinful activity, you did one pious thing by, helping somebody the devotee pointing out for the Brahmin where the thing was. He says, if I'd known that, I would have used my whole body to show him where like that. So it's not that they, you understand. Like that's the whole point. It's not about the doing the right thing. It's about the benefit you can get by doing the right thing. That's motive passion. That's separatist. And if we're proud also, then that's motive ignorance. Does that make sense? But if we may have our attachments, have our things, and we're engaging and we don't really notice them, that's not what we're talking about. If we notice and then try to do something about it, and then that's proper. If we notice and say, no, that's cool, it's fine, I'm great, then it turns into that. Does that make sense? Like that. So the choice is yours. Yes.
Maharaj, this statement that it is made, devotional service, which is not for Krishna, how can this even exist? What are they doing?
Because you have this wide variety. The living entity, being conditioned, has all kinds of levels at which they function. All kinds of levels of attachment. That's why it says devotional service may take many lifetimes. It can be done in one lifetime, but we see many times it takes many lifetimes because of these attachments. And so, however far someone gets this life, they'll continue that next lifetime. And then slowly, eventually it'll come to, where that shraddha gets to critical mass, where then they have the faith in pure devotional service, and then with determination they move through. Then that lifetime they get through in one lifetime. But anybody who has that, they've done that in other lifetimes. So, and all it is that consciousness. So even if one's not at that position, it would take you many lifetimes by associating with people who are more advanced and taking advantage of what the acharyas have given. We can come to that state. So that's what's being given by the acharyas, is that whatever your position, you come in contact, you can perfect your life in one lifetime. Does that make sense? So that's the thing. Bhagavatam says that, Veda says that. It's not very, but at the same time it also says it takes lifetimes. Because it's just building up. So if one takes advantage, then it goes quicker. Like that. So that's the idea. So we know that you are the protector. Oh, okay. Although we do not understand your true form, aprameyatma, we know that you are the protector of those who surrender to you, prapanna, and therefore we surrender to you. Neglecting a prayer for devotion to you, we instead are intent on deliverance from our own suffering, having intelligence separate from you, and with our own interest, pritag diyaha. So they're even pointing out is even our position is still from a separatist. But they're seeing that surrender to the Lord is the important point. So that's what Krishna is going to see and accept.
At least they're pretty honest about it.
Yeah, so that's progressive. When you think it's okay, that's then when it's regressive. So that's the point. It's when you're on and you can see, but it's honest from the point of view of what the Shastra says, not from how you think it will work for you, socially. Like I remember somebody, it was two examples that happened within a few, I think maybe 2 days of each other. There was a discussion about a position of some devotees and what they'd been doing. And they had certain positions and all that, and the one had a very nice attitude. You could see the faults that they were pointing out, and this and that, really wanted to adjust, and this and that. And so it ended up that he ended up with a better position than what he was in. Then the second devotee, who was there at the time, seeing that, but he wasn't going to be discussed, they weren't going to discuss him until the next day. He saw that and saw, wow, that was a good technique. And so then the next day he just said, yeah, I'm useless, I'm this, I'm that, I'm so many things like that. I shouldn't be doing this service, I'm so this and that, And so then everyone thought, oh, okay, yeah, if you really think so, yeah, okay, then we'll find someone else. He was shocked. For years he was shocked. What happened? I did exactly what the other guy did. But the other guy was actually sincere, and for him it was political. He thought that, wow, I'll get that position I've always been trying to get but always been blocked from. Now I'll get it. Yeah, but it's yeah. So that's the thing, is that the mood is correct. Then even though it may be the same situation, Krishna seeing that, then it's considered sincere. Does that make sense? So the secondary is something that's used, but it's not actually the real thing. It's the medium used. So you can use, so the medium is proper, means people are all doing what's considered pious are the activities of devotional service. Right? That's what's pious. That's what's called pious. But people are doing these without devotional service, and they're not interested in devotional service. So it's only called piety. But because it's favorable for bhakti, it's the natural forms of secondary forms for devotional service. Therefore, that's what Krishna comes to see, that it's established in that, because then the devotees have a very nice culture to function within. But the actual point is, by preaching, now you turn these pious people into devotees, because then the piety is actually being used in its proper state. Does that make sense? That's the whole thing. Then it's being used correctly. So that's actually what's going on in the world. So this idea is, we're just a few guys in this little corner of something, and then there's the big bad world and the reality and all that. No. Krishna and devotional service, that's the reality, and then in one very small corner of the universe, then you have all these guys doing all their other funny stuff. Like that. Does that make sense? Yeah. So the universe is not playing didgeridoos, they're playing Venus. Long tube that's hollow, that's similar, but yeah, there's a difference. Does that make sense? Yeah. Well, not that didgeridoos are bad, we're just saying that. I think it was, I'm not sure, I think on Indradunda Mars's tour, someone showed up with a didgeridoo. For the bhajans, now and again you see them show up. It's very, not very often, but every, 5-10 years you see someone show up with one.
So this sort of socially inept person who's come to bhakti, who can't understand, like what you're saying, that it is about devotion. It is not about the secondary. It is not about your MD degree and all.
Yes.
Such a person, he even can't have a loving relationship with anybody.
No, because it's all about the secondary. Because loving a relationship means that the form is what I think it should be, then that's loving. And if you don't do that, then you don't love me.
Even like an animal, a cat, or like a hamster also, you can't.
That's why, I don't know if it's still popular now, but there was a time, like about 10 years ago, that having a pet rock. Yeah, well, that's the perfection of pet rock. Yeah, like that. See, that's what I'm saying. It's considered good. So therefore, that's the original.
My sister called Kira.
Sorry?
What? That's your pet rock or something?
Yeah.
Where she's
My pet rock. And so then you have virtual pets.
Even 20 years ago, they had this in Japan, Tamagotchi. Even that thing, you had to center your life around that thing.
Yeah. So the whole point is it's there and people still fail. Right? It's a virtual cat. It still dies. You know? So that's the whole point, is that if they just follow the natural form that's there, the natural culture, all these things develop, but we don't want to follow them because we think something else will make us happy. So that's the mode of ignorance. So the Vedas say, do it like this. And we say, no, that can't make us happy. And we'll give some extreme example and why it won't work. Even though there may be millions of examples that it works very nicely. And we can't give that many examples in the Western culture that work. You know what I'm saying? You know, it's just like in the West, okay, they didn't have, you know, if you go back in time, there were not so many divorces. It was there, and it was an okay thing, but it wasn't that common. You know, it was something to gossip about. You know, because they had that fear that it would displease God, and it was, you know, something in front of God. You took the vows, and you're supposed to be God conscious. And so because of the religious aspect, therefore, they work better. They put in more effort. And as we get rid of the religious aspect, then they work less. And so then talking about that the Vedic system and like this is archaic, but it works. If you follow it, it works. If you don't follow it, then of course it doesn't work. But this idea that somehow or another the modern has all the solution to all the problems, it's like, if that's the case, then why isn't it going great? Why is the news always miserable? Like even Ananda Bazaar, does it always have good news, or there's not as nice news?
One or two writers write something
nice, so they can still keep the name. Yeah, so a newspaper it's called Ananda Bazaar, right? So the nice things are supposed to be, but they just same old trash like everybody else. Because that's the way the world is. That's what people want. That's it. Because if everybody else is suffering, then I have a chance that, you know, I'm not the only idiot. Right, you know. But if everybody else is happy, what's wrong with me? What's that? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good. Okay. The kings continued, people in this world are always engaged in sinful activities and are thus bewildered about their real duty, which is to worship you according to your commandments. Right? This activity would truly bring them good fortune. Let us offer our obeisances unto the all-powerful Lord, who appears as time and suddenly cuts down one's stubborn hope for a long life in this world. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments. In this verse, they offer respects while describing their fear of material existence. The king said, persons like us, loka, are inattentive to activities for our benefit. Kushale karmani. Krishna asked, to pious actions? The kings replied, no, we are inattentive to activities mentioned by you, tvad udite. Krishna asked, is it activity of sama, dhamma, yama, niyama, and in jnana yoga? Kings replied, no, we are inattentive to worship of you, bhavad archane, which is the real treasure for everyone. We are rather engaged in unlawful acts which produce material happiness from wives and sons. Moreover, such unfortunate souls never achieve any happiness. For you, being powerful, suddenly destroy our hopes for long life. We offer respects to you in the form of your energy of time. Those who are not your devotees should do this. Right, so Krishna's asking, so you're saying activities that are not, you're engaged in activities, you're inattentive to those activities good for you. Does that mean you're avoiding the pious activities mentioned in the Karmakanda? No, like that. So that means in the Jnanakanda, no, we're inattentive to devotional service. So that's the real benefit, because the others you can get a temporary benefit and then time takes it all away. So is that actually for our benefit? We're performing the proper karma, proper jnana, getting the benefits of that, but is it really a benefit? Because at some point it'll be lost. Does this make sense? Yeah. The kings continued, "You are the predominating deity, Lord of the universe, and have descended into this world with your personal power to protect the saintly and suppress the wicked. We cannot understand, O Lord, how anyone can transgress your law and still continue to enjoy the fruits of his work." Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments, "It is really astonishing to us why anyone who hates you or your devotees is not destroyed. The Lord of the universe, Jagad Inaha, has appeared at a certain time, Kalaya, or with his portion, Baladev, for protecting the pious and destroying the evil. However, other wicked men, such as Jarasandha, surpass your law and persecute the devotees and protect the wicked. Although you appear to destroy the evil men who are prospering and happy due to though you appear to destroy the evil men, they are prospering and happy due to past pious acts. Though you appear to protect the devotees, are they suffering now due to their past sins? It is not possible for us to understand this. It should not be that dull material karma should be more powerful than you." Right? Because the idea is that here is we have these sinful persons, these wicked persons, and they're materially enjoying, while devotees, then they're suffering at the hands of these wicked persons. So then is it that they're just enjoying the karma from previous life, and even though they're wicked now, but they're still getting the results of karma from previous life, or the devotees, then they're suffering now because of the results of karma from previous life. But if that's the case, since Krishna has come to destroy the demons and protect the devotees, and it appears that it's the opposite, does that mean karma is more powerful than Krishna? Right? That's the doubt that comes up. So, yeah. The kings continued, "O Lord, with this corpse-like body, always full of fear, we bear the burden of the relative happiness of kings, which is just like a dream. Thus we have rejected the real happiness of the soul, which comes by rendering selfless service to you. Being so very wretched, we simply suffer in this life under the spell of your illusory energy." Right? So basically it comes down to Krishna's independent. He takes care of things how he wants. But in the long run, that's how it'll work out. So we'll say, oh, he's not taking care simply because we have a time frame that's shorter than, or quicker than what Krishna is unfolding it at. Yes.
It's very interesting. Now they say this, that after being released by Krishna, they glorify actually that position was better because we could remember you and develop the devotion.
Yes, yes. Yeah, same with Kunti. Then she says it was better when it was worse. So we see another place where the origin comes from. So these positions, then that's why the difficulty is not actually a problem for the devotee because they remember Krishna. But if they're trying to get material benefit, then it's a problem. But if they're trying to surrender to Krishna, it's not a problem because it's just a cause for remembering Krishna, surrendering to Krishna. Because the real benefit's not to be found here. The real benefit is from the spiritual world. That's why it says, what? Golokera prema dan harinam sankirtan. That's the real benefit, is what comes from there, not what is here. You know, because these things you can get, but then it's gone, you know, so, yeah. So it's just like you can take up the holy name, chanting of the holy name. How long is the benefit you get from that? Eternal, right? How long is the benefit if you ask God for a Mercedes-Benz? Right? Doesn't last very long.
Might be eternal.
Might be eternal, right?
According to our perception.
Yeah, but the point is yeah, but then you always have to worry about it. It runs out. It's, you know, people scratch it, bump into it. As soon as you get it, it's worth half the price. You know, all these things. Yeah, so therefore it's not. Huh?
So the difficulty seems to be with the sadhakas as ourselves is that we work on both eternal time and temporary present.
Mm-hmm.
We have to be, you know, Krishna says,
But are we dealing with content? That means the The present or the problems that we're dealing with the past or the future?
Obviously the problems, but we're trying to concentrate on the present.
Yes, but that's then because of our sadhana, because of understanding the eternal.
Yeah.
So in other words, we can be engaged in the eternal in the present. We can't do it in the past, we can't do it in the future because you're not there.
Right.
We're only in the present.
Yeah.
But there's these perceptions of the past and the future, then these are where our consciousness generally lies because of passion and ignorance. So those who are dutiful, then they work in the present because whatever it is, that's what they deal with. So that's why when we're working with these things, then that's also the importance of understanding the principle, because the principle is what's applied in the present. The particular form that it took as in the example, that's something from the past or future. So it may apply, it may not apply, but if you understand the principle, then you can always apply it. But if we're too much influenced by passion and ignorance, then it's more about the secondary. Right? So it's not about the performance. So at least here, then, goodness means we're performing our duties and all that, but pure goodness means we're doing that to please Krishna. So goodness is the proper form, but the attitude being pure goodness, that's the real form. So in that way, we can work on eternal time. That doesn't mean manana time. That means eternal means time's eternal, but we're dealing with the present. Because we have to remember is that manana is tomorrow. You know? And so you can't do anything tomorrow. You have to do it today. But since I'm going to do it tomorrow, I do nothing today. So therefore I perfectly balance the mode of ignorance and the mode of passion and completely avoid the mode of goodness. So the devotees can work on this eternal principle. The system is given, we just have to use it. And it's always applicable. It's time, place, and circumstance don't actually affect it. What our background is, what we're doing, none of that affects it. We can be affected by it because we identify with the conditioning, we are affected, but we don't have to be. Because the soul is beyond. So it's just a matter of, that's why sadhana takes time, is for us to become convinced that we don't have to actually function from that perspective. We use the same tools because now we have the perspective and use the tools. But because of the perspective, we use the tools how we perceive them. Well, if we do it according to the eternal platform, we see the tools how Krishna perceives them. And then we're able to use them in his service. Because then we use his perspective rather than ours. Though we may prefer using the tools that we have. That's always the easier. That's the recommendation. Otherwise, Arjuna already suggested giving up the Kshatriya tools and using Brahminical ones. And Krishna said, no. Your conditioning is such that that's what it's going to do. Your body, your mind, your intelligence, your ego, that all is perfectly aligned for doing Kshatriya duties. Now, the point is doing them for Krishna. That's what makes it perfect, not that you're doing Brahminical duties over Kshatriya duties. So, yeah. So in that way, one can always function in the present. So, yeah.
Devotees usually say that for the kind of surrender that the gopis have, or this surrender that the kings that is mentioned over here,
Right.
that is possible only if something critical happens in the life. Not
If something critical happens in their life, then they could surrender like that. Otherwise, not. So they should be happy with critical things happening in their life. They should look forward. When is that critical thing going to happen in my life that I fully surrender like these kings or the gopis? Yeah? Try saying that when they make this point, and then see what happens. You know, suddenly people start noticing their appointments and this and that, or you want some tea, or, you know, something else. Suddenly it'll change. Sanatana Goswami, yes?
Like 12 years ago, devotees in the Moscow temple were discussing about Mother Kunti's prayers, and they were all of them excited and chanting all those prayers together. And they actually discovered that all kinds of problems started happening in the temple, and they really started to regret such prayers.
But couldn't they just surrender to Krishna and then everything would work out?
I don't know.
But I'm saying that's the thing to do, because let us say you have something, and you could function with something better. But as long as you're attached to that something, then that's always going to be a problem. So when Krishna takes it away or starts to, erode, the position of it, we're attached to it, so we won't give it up. But you want a better position, but we're unwilling to give up the worst position for the better position. We want the better position first, so we have both, and then we can decide whether we want to keep it, in the living room, move it into another room, put it in the attic, or give it to Salvation Army, right? So like that. So it's just a matter. We want them both, but the point is that's not how these things necessarily work. Consciousness, yes, we move forward and we have that, but you have to give it up. As soon as you are situated in the higher consciousness, you have to give up the lower. Otherwise, you will drop back. So if you have it, then you attach to that, then that will stay. Like that. So it's just the way it is. It's just how it works. Because you don't know, you don't think it's good, so you listen to authority. Does that make sense? Srila Sanatana Goswami comments, our happiness is like a dream, temporary and illusory. It is without happiness. The body by which we try to enjoy ends up giving suffering with constant sickness. We carry our burden with constant fear, right? Because anything we do have, we can lose. And anything that could go wrong could, right? Isn't that the Murphy principle?
The water falls on the floor.
Yeah. It means, what do you call it? Murphy's Law. I think is if it can go wrong, it will. I think that's the law. So like this, then we're always fearful. We're fearful of losing what we do have, and we're fearful of what's going to happen that, these other, yeah. With constant fear from sickness, etc. Not just, just add in what you like. Shashvat bhayena. Ascertaining death, detestable like death. In either case, there is suffering in living. O Lord, we belong to you. Giving up the happiness which is attained by your mercy, the happiness of realizing you in truth or meditating on you, we suffer in samsara, right? So the happiness is given by Krishna, that they give up for trying to be involved in the material things, which don't give any happiness, right? It's the promise of happiness. It's like the carrot on the end of the stick, in front of the donkey. He never gets to it. It's just that inspiration that he could get to it, We experience plenty of suffering because we have become foolish. Ati kripana, by your insurmountable maya. Or we carry the burden of happiness of enjoying as kings. We have given up the indescribable happiness in the heart of, or our surup, derived from your lotus feet, and suffer in this world, right? So the surup is that of service, right? Because that's the surup of the living entity. Does that make sense? It's not the form, it's the devotional attitude. Then the form matches the attitude. Does that make sense? So it's that we're doing service, that produces the form that we're in. So it's material service, we get that kind of thing. It's spiritual, we get that. Huh?
Like you mentioned that Gopi is not a woman of this world. And you quoted Bhaktisiddhanta saying that whole day you sit and do Gopi, 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 Gopi. You not become a Gopi, you become a woman.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that Gopi is that particular consciousness which has caused for this particular body and this service form.
Yes. Yeah, because it's about the mood, not about the form. Because that's how we got here, is by taking the forms. We call it material happiness because it means it's all Krishna. So anything connected to Krishna, which is everything, it can generate happiness. If the senses and the sense objects, which means the secondary forms, and you have the qualities, if they meet in the proper way according to the rules given by Krishna, it will produce some kind of, how you say, what would be the proper way of saying? An auspicious result, right? But the problem is since that auspicious result is in the medium of the secondary, and that secondary is not the jiva, that jiva cannot actually relate to it. I think I'm the enjoyer of this secondary, that's why I'm trying to relate to it. But in actuality, it can't give any satisfaction to the soul. So even though at the time that they're enjoying, they'll say they're enjoying, but afterwards they'll notice it's not enjoyment because it doesn't give anything to the soul. Does that make sense? So that's the whole point, is that we get distracted by engaging the senses and the sense objects, the activities that that can produce, the future prospect of engagement of the senses, all that secondary aspect. Then it's attractive because it's Krishna. But because we're not using it for Krishna, then it can't satisfy the soul. And since you're not using it for Krishna, then the internal potency doesn't want to be the secondary nature. So therefore you're given the shadow of that, or the external energy, which is unconscious. It doesn't care. Right? The material energy as itself, the dead matter, doesn't care if you try to enjoy it or not. But the person in charge of it, you're going to get trouble trying to enjoy it for not connecting it to Krishna. Does that make sense? If you follow God's laws not connected to Krishna, you get a better result than not following God's laws and not connecting it to Krishna. And then if one asks, because they have to ask, what if we're not performing what's connected to Krishna but connecting it to Krishna? Like that is, then you'll get the aspect of the happiness of the devotional service, but you'll get the suffering of what comes along with what's not according to God's laws. Because when you perform the pious activity, it gives the result in that form. So if you do an impious activity, it gives a result in that form. So as we can't say that I'll perform impiety and get piety, that doesn't work. You can't say that. I'll boil potatoes, and when I end, potatoes are cheaper than some other vegetables, so therefore, or peanut oil is really cheap, so therefore I'll put it into my fancy bottle for my high grade won the award this year olive oil, but when I pour it out, it'll be that high grade olive oil, right? Isn't that how it works? Just because I want it to. So that's the foolishness. They think that, the Veda, they don't like the Veda because it's so practical and logical. It's not sentimental. Whatever activity you perform, that's the result you get. Right? I perform a pious act, I get a result in the form that pious act was performed within. I gave in charity, I will get that kind of facility back. I'm nice to someone, I'll get that niceness back. Right? So now, the difference is are you going to use it for Krishna or for not? Maya. It's not, so therefore, if I'm not nice to people, but I'm not nice to people in Krishna's service, the devotional service being rendered, there'll be some benefit there, but the not niceness that you are to others is going to have the reaction of people not being nice to you. And because you're not following God's laws, it's not that pleasing. It means there is that intent. Now, if you don't know, then that's fine. But if you are avoiding because you think, no, this is our culture, and we don't follow the other, then how is it going to be pleasing to Krishna? So you're specifically avoiding the pious things that Krishna recommends and doing things that you consider pious and are good for us. Does that make sense? So we always have to be careful is that the secondary produces results in the secondary. You go into the kitchen and cook, which is a secondary activity, you end up with something cooked. You don't end up with a nice flower bouquet. Right? It just doesn't work like that. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that's how it functions. So therefore, that's why then we use the recommended secondary, because those recommended secondary, that's what's going to be the nicest things to offer to Krishna. Does that make sense? But we use whatever we can get. And if we ourselves don't have that facility or that we can get we do that, but never consider them better. Just because that's what we do in my neighborhood. Yes?
Sometimes we see that people, they're not satisfied dealing with secondary. Then they come into Krishna consciousness and they deal with the primary. However, they don't find the taste in there, so they go back to the second, playing with the secondary. So how is that happens?
It's just a matter of you have to see the means when you say I'm not interested in the secondary anymore. That means now so the progressive one is I'm not interested in the secondary where I'm using the secondary for myself. Now that I understand the primary is the real point, I want to now engage the secondary in the service of the primary. Then they won't have a problem of sliding back. But when they give up, they have a particular activity and they give all that up, and then they don't accept the Vedic recommendation, then you're in limbo. So how long can you stay in that state? You have to do something. You have to behave and act, and that's why Arjuna asked, how does this person who's spiritual, how does he sit, how does he walk, how does he talk? So you either take up the recommended and then use that in Krishna's service, or you'll tend to go back to your own culture. Because you won't go back to some other culture. Does that make sense?
So actually, can we say that Krishna didn't get into the center of their lives, and it was still about them?
It's still about them because the secondary is giving them problems. So by dealing with the primary, that's how I'll become happy. So as a beginning, that's the way it's going to work. The neophyte generally tends to look at it, the happiness I'll get. But as they go and they start to recognize this happiness is coming from interaction with Krishna and his devotees, so therefore the natural position is to always be in that position. So it's not about the facilities and the happiness that comes there, it's about serving. Then they'll start to make that adjustment and move to the Madhyama platform, to the Uttama platform. Does that make sense? Yeah. So it's a matter of progression. That's why the sadhana bhakti is given, because it progresses. And if we see that, then it goes naturally. Now we may start exactly where we are. Like I mentioned, there's that one gentleman that I had that he loved reading Chaitanya Charitamrita. But bring up vegetarian, don't bring that up. Just don't. But that's there, so you cultivate that, talk with him about Chaitanya Charitamrita, what parts he liked, bring out, and then just talk whatever's there, and he's doing devotional service. That'll eventually purify when he can take up the other things. Now he knows that this other is a better thing in that, but he's attached, so therefore he's on that platform, then it still can be progressive. Because he recognizes. But if he says, no, it doesn't matter if you're vegetarian, not vegetarian, so in fact it's better, you're not vegetarian, because then we're more honest, we're more, this is what I grew up in, it's my culture, why I should change my culture just because some guys, are vegetarian. That kind of stuff, how is that going to be progressive on any level? Even materially, it's not progressive. You know what I'm saying? So even someone who's really a gross materialist, if he understood that something else was a better method, they'd do it. It's just like before, go back to the 60s and stuff. You had the American business and all that, but then you had the Japanese business. Somehow or another it was going so much better. Companies were expanding. So studying it for years and years and years, and they saw the methods that they were using. Then they started doing that. They could say, no, we're Americans. Why we should do the Japanese thing? We beat them in the war. Why we should take up their business model, like that. You could do that. And then you could remain that they're going to be better. So the point is we can say all these things that, we're from this and we can't take up these other things. But they do. They do. And it improves their life. Like that. Does that make sense? Because guaranteed, you go into the grocery store nowadays, what's in that store was not what was in the store. It means the stuff that was in the store when they were kids is still there. But there's a wide range beyond that. And there's a good chance that all that stuff that comes beyond that's not from around here. It's from another place. And somehow or another, they're engaging all that and yoga and everything they're engaging as long as it's about themselves. As soon as it's about surrender to Krishna and giving up attachment, that's where we draw the line. We're not about to cross that line. We wouldn't want to be fanatic. And then to make a philosophy on top of that, that's a problem. Because how will it be progressive? They'll get stuck. You know, and that's their own life. Now if they preach this to others, they get others stuck. Now all those will be added onto their lifetimes of being stuck. You're not going to get away with it. Is that, yes?
It sounds like the perfect Sangha, because we talk about Sangha as the dynamic principle
Yes.
in Bhakti.
Yes.
So it's the right amount of pressure on the person without, him being burned.
Yes. Yes. In other words, it has to be the right amount of pressure that they're still comfortable with.
Yeah.
And comfortable means they're not uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So that's the point you want to take. So we try to do that naturally ourselves in the environment we're in. How much do I require? And that it just makes it work. And that's what we do at. And with time we'll see adjustment. Either we will see we can work with more because we do it for Krishna. What before we thought was too much trouble, now we do that for Krishna. So now that trouble's for Krishna. Or we find it's not so useful in what I'm doing for Krishna, and now I can work it, less than what I was using before. And then I'm engaged nicely in Krishna's service. So it's just a matter of, it's very individual. So that's the whole point, is choose that sadhu sangha in which, like you said, we have that little bit of inspiration and pressure that we should try to do better. Like that. Be thoughtful, try to apply it in their own life. Then it becomes perfect. Yeah. Om Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki, Samaveta Bhaktividya ki, Jai Nitai Gaura Premanandi.
Can I ask you a quick question?
What is that?
You mentioned in a previous class how, in terms of our anarthas, that when Balaram kills, helps destroy anarthas, that it requires some of our own effort.
We have to be committed to the idea of getting rid of them. It means, in other words, what we get by the benefit of Lord Nityananda and Advaita Prabhu is that giving up the desire to control and enjoy and try to be happy within the material world. So we have to be committed to that idea. Then they'll take it away. Otherwise, if they take it away, then they'll take away whatever taste we have in the material platform, and we won't be satisfied with that.
But with Krishna, it's
But his areas aren't that. Those ones then, that anger, though these will just start going away. But to give up the material taste, that we have to want to do. Balaram will do it. We can't do it, but really. Oh, okay, it's over. It's not a hint or something.
It's a bookmark, just to show the
Okay.
text to see.
Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's what we're trying to do.
That is mentioned in 2 places.
Yes, so this is what I wanted to get. And the other one is where? 90.
This is in the previous book.
Oh, it's in the previous book. That's always more difficult to find when it's not in the book that you have.